joining. As Rebecca said, would like to welcome everybody to this series of webinars for 2018. Today's focus is really just to get to know each other a little bit better and talk about some of our successes for the past year and what's coming up in 2018. Before I get to that, let's do quick introductions. So you're hearing from myself right now, Tyler Radford. I'm HOT's Executive Director. Also on the call with me and co-presenting today, Nate Smith. I'd like to give Nate a happy birthday shout out today. It's his birthday today.
Thanks.
Sure. Nate's our Director of Technology Innovation. We also have Paul Withall, our Director of Community Programs, Rebecca, who you just heard from, our Community and Partnerships Manager. Also joining us today, we have Michael Heismeyer, HOT's Training Working Group Lead, Russ Defner, Activation Working Group Lead, and several of our board of directors, who you see pictured in the bottom right-hand corner. I believe Melanie and Pete are on the call, and maybe some others. So thanks everyone very much for joining us today. Mix of HOT staff, board members, leaders in working groups, and other community contributors. Glad to have you here. A quick recap on 2017. It's been a busy year for many of you in the HOT community, and I thank you for that. We have some pretty amazing accomplishments for last year. We implemented 20 different donor-funded projects across 7 countries, and you'll hear in just a few moments from my colleague Paul, who will talk a little bit more about the specifics, what we're doing in each country and where those are. HOT activated for 5 disasters. It was a busy year, especially in the 3rd and 4th quarter of the year. And our community also came together to support each other. So 7 local community disaster response activations. 14 HOT community-led projects received microgrants or device grants. What this means is essentially small chunks of money between $2,000 and $5,000 to support initiatives that are conceptualized and led by OpenStreetMap leaders around the world. I think this is something all of you are aware of, our new tasking manager. If you map with HOT, you will have been using this for several months now. And we're continuing to improve on that. And my colleague Nate will tell you a little bit more on how you can get involved in ongoing work on the tasking manager. And thank you to those of you who are already working on this. HOT was featured in a number of publications in the media. You can see some of those listed below. And on the bottom right, this is one of the most exciting bits for me, and this is really something that has been part of our goals since HOT's formation in 2010, which is we know that volunteer contributors can have a really, really critical role during disaster and times of crisis. One of our challenges is often helping the institutions to understand that the role that we can play. And in the second half of this year, we were successful in working with UN, OCHA, and Humanitarian Data Exchange in getting direct exports of OpenStreetMap data synchronized with Humanitarian Data Exchange often on a real-time basis or daily basis. And this is really exciting because it puts the data that you're generating directly in the hands of humanitarian actors on the ground. Next slide, please. Just a little bit about our community. So our community has grown quite substantially over the past 7 years. And I want to start towards the right-hand side of this screen, which I think is the most critical piece. We've had more than 95,000 people register in the tasking manager since the tasking manager launched. And that's really incredible. Our community has grown to nearly 100,000 volunteers who've worked with us over the years. And this includes both directly and indirectly. It doesn't mean that all of these projects were necessarily sponsored by HOT or one of our donors, but it means that they're part of our bigger ecosystem. And then sort of the smaller circles moving to the left, 131 voting members of HOT. And these are the group who helps to elect our board of directors and really provides leadership on a lot of our initiatives within the organization and within our community. And finally on the staff side, in my perspective, community volunteers are always at the core of what we do. And HOT is and really will always be an open community. It's driven by the initiatives of members and volunteers. The HOT headquarters team, which is all the way to the left, 18 people, our staff members who are here to support those things, provided an administrative backbone for connecting with donors and connecting with the formal humanitarian response community. And we're also really proud to have grown to 60 national staff in 5 country offices. These are people who run our field programs day to day and are really a critical part and really sort of our face on the ground. So thanks to all of you, whichever circle you fall in. Let's keep moving. Next slide. A little bit about, so that's 2017, talking a little bit about our approach going forward over the coming years. We first started talking about this in September at the HOT Summit in Ottawa, Canada. We held a face-to-face board meeting, and really this was a meeting for the board to get to spend some time sort of apart from our day-to-day work activities and spend some time thinking about our high-level strategic priority areas for the coming 3 years. And what are some of the obstacles that are in the way for us help achieving our mission and achieving some of those priorities? Coming out of that, we got our senior staff team together in Washington, D.C. at our headquarters office to talk through a little bit more detail how we could approach some of the priorities that the board set out in September. And based on that, our staff team has begun to write up some of their sort of detailed approach in the areas that they're working on. So Rebecca's going to tell you a little bit more about what came out of the community discussion. Paul's going to tell you a little bit more about what came out of the field discussion. And Nate's going to tell you a little bit more about what came out of the technology discussion. The key thing to take away there is that we're working to consolidate all of our discussions and notes into something that's actually readable. And we'll be publishing this first for other HOT staff in the field offices to sort of provide input on. And then a consolidated draft will go out to HOT's voting membership for input and revision. And this will set the framework for HOT strategy over the next 3 to 5 years, with our end goal being having board sign off in the next few months, hopefully by May 2018. And this is, our goal with this is something that to have a coherent strategy and not to change our mission, but really to just provide some detail over what our goals are over the next 3 to 5 years and some strategies for how we're planning to carry out those goals. Next slide, please. Thanks. I just wanted to highlight a few of the things that came out of the board meeting in Ottawa so that everybody's aware. And we can talk more about these. We're going to leave some time towards the end of the call to discuss in more detail, but some of the big themes we heard about were sort of embedding, helping institutions, UN agencies, NGOs, World Bank, and other multilateral organizations to really adopt what we care about, which is open data and open source, and helping them to learn and provide knowledge exchange on how to do that. Technology and data were another area. So a big topic of this year's discussions were integrating artificial intelligence and machine learning into our workflow. It's quite clear that doing this work is complicated, and it most certainly we do not see this as something that will replace the work that our committed community is doing, but we do see it as something that we're going to continue to investigate and work on ways that make sense so that we can have humans and machines working together. Another big topic was data quality. So we're continuing to put a really big focus this year on improving our tools and processes around ensuring that the data that we produce as a community meets a sort of minimum threshold for quality, and that it can be shared confidently with the partners who are relying on it. Community and support and development, you'll hear more about this from Rebecca. We're going to continue our microgrants program for 2018. Many of you were involved in this, either reviewing applications or potentially receiving funding in last year. So we're happy to hear your feedback on that and how we can improve. Branding and communication. So we've been kind of, we've cobbled together a pretty workable communication strategy, but we would like to really expand this next year. It's not only focused on communicating the work that we're doing, but really helping to help other larger NGOs and humanitarian actors sort of see the tangible impact that it can have within their missions and within their organization. So part of that is simply doing a better job at communicating impact, which leads into the next area, which is we're going to put some time and effort over the next 6 months in quantifying all the amazing things that we're doing, using a standard framework across all our projects, both volunteer-led projects and hot donor-funded projects, so that we can clearly communicate the impact we're having on the world. And finally, the organizational structure. HOT's growing, there's no question, both the organization, the NGO side of HOT, and also the global volunteer community. So we're working on ways, we want to be sort of a leader in looking at new and flexible models for how an NGO and global community work together as one and deliver together as one. And so there's changes that could come with that, which could include things like looking at our membership model in more detail, potentially appointing external advisors that we can rely upon for specific subject matter expertise. And at the end of the day, our end game is still focused on building the map in OpenStreetMap. That hasn't changed, but it's really also focused on fostering this sort of global ecosystem around open mapping and packaging our knowledge and training so that anyone can access that information and anyone can pick it up regardless of the country that they're working in to implement that in their own country. Next slide, please. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Rebecca Firth. She'll tell you a little bit more about what's happening with our OpenStreetMap community support initiatives. So over to you, Rebecca.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Tyler. So I think someone's kind of accidentally been drawing a few lines on this slide. It's a feature of Zoom. So Rachel's just sorting that out. So apologies for the slightly odd display which is coming through right now. Rachel, if you could just knock it on to the next slide. Perfect, thank you. So as Tyler said, microgrants were a really big thing that we launched in community projects last year, and something that we definitely want to continue doing this year. The 2017 micrograntees completed some really amazing projects, and there's kind of their stories are documented on the HOT website for people who want to learn more about them. And we'll also be kind of working on summarizing and sharing a little more about those learnings from their programs, because obviously this is quite an unprecedented thing in terms of community development so far in OpenStreetMap. So with microgrants, we have these 4 key aims, which we just wanted to share now so that people are kind of fully aware of the program and you know, what our objectives are to achieve out of it. And also in case anyone on the call is thinking of applying for a microgrant. So the key objectives are helping open mapping and open data communities who are using OpenStreetMap. This year, we're focusing on organizations or communities using OSM as a tool to prepare for, respond to, or reduce risks of disaster. And the goal of the microgrants really is to be a sort of springboard to communities who want to scale what they're currently doing. So the sort of kind of resources like equipment or getting legal registration or running training workshops in order to scale the number of people that are part of a community. And there's been, you know, some amazing examples from microgrants last year where communities went from kind of 15 to 150 members in a year. Also to develop leadership skills across OpenStreetMap leaders worldwide through providing an extra layer of support and mentoring and encouraging gender balance and youth participation especially, which we kind of, I guess, broadly are known to be issues within the OpenStreetMap community. And it's something that, you know, as HOT, we really want to be able to facilitate a diverse and a comfortable community for people to be part of. Thirdly, helping those communities to kind of amplify their presence and share what they're doing more broadly within the global OpenStreetMap community and also in development and humanitarian sectors to help them kind of become more sustainable ongoing. And to broaden the ways in which open mapping and open data is contributing to reducing impact of disasters. So we're really interested to read read proposals from a variety of organisations worldwide, especially those who have new ideas about how OSM can support disaster reduction. So this slide just quickly covers off the programme for 2018. We're going to be doing 4 to 5 microgrants of $2,000 to $5,000 US dollars. The reason that's slightly smaller than last year is that we're also running the NetHope device grant program, so we'll be supporting 12 communities through that. And so in total we'll have 16 to 17 communities supported next year. The application form launches tomorrow. So even if you're sort of not interested to apply, any help you have in terms of sharing that to communities, or if any communities kind of ask for any support with writing their proposal, I'm sure that will be really appreciated. A lot of the applicants we had last year, it was the first time they'd ever written a proposal, and so community feedback was really helpful to kind of help them best position their projects. There are some other ways that it would be great to get more people involved. So the first one is that there'll be a panel of about 5 people who all represent different parts of HOT or different experiences, who will be reviewing all the proposals that come in. And we're currently kind of recruiting that panel now. So if you'd like to be a part of it and help decide which communities receive microgrants this year, then please get in touch with me, because your help in choosing a good selection of projects would be really appreciated. And then also, if you are interested in supporting a micrograntee through their journey, as I mentioned, a lot of the communities haven't got much experience in managing grants or application forms, things like that before, but also experience using different types of tools and things like that. I know we have Janet on the call who received a microgrant this year, so might be able to talk a little more to those experiences during the questions at the end. But mentorship, support, and sort of peer-to-peer collaboration is really important for communities, and is something we definitely want to facilitate. So if you're interested in developing a sort of closer relationship with a particular community, then also please let me know. Next slide, please. And then just a couple of activities for Community Working Group before I pass over to Paul. The first thing is just on the webinars. So obviously we have 44 people joining this one, so that's a nice indicator of the number of people interested to hear a little bit about HOT and our 2018 plans. But the rest of the webinars that we've planned so far have a specific focus on knowledge sharing. We got some of this feedback from the State of the Community Research and Survey that many of you filled out at the end of last year, around how people were really interested in learning more from different parts of the HOT community and across its full variety. And so we've set up a number of webinars to try and help that to happen, and also try to encourage better data quality and more field mapping. So the next one is going to be organised by Russ and Matt Gibb from American Red Cross, and that's going to be a validation training webinar to try and kind of onboard new validators. Then we're going to be sharing from a series of HOT projects where we're running kind of field programs and sort of knowledge sharing on how those work. So sharing from the Turkey, Tanzania and Uganda teams, and also running an open data kit training. And then later on in the year, we'll be sort of adding in new topics that people suggest as and when. So if you have any suggestions, please let us know. Another thing we're going to be doing in the next couple of days is to publish the initial findings of the State of the Community report. So the survey that we did, actually, we had a really amazing number of respondents this year. We had 267. I think the highest that we've ever had before is about 150 or something. So nice to get a lot of feedback there. And we also did about 20 interviews with people from different parts of the HOT community. And that highlighted lots of new ideas, gave us a better understanding of the community health and demographics as they are today. And the Community Working Group is going to take that forward. So watch out for an email from Amelia in a couple of days, which will sort of share the full results. And then the other thing, just to highlight here, I realise I'm running over my time slot slightly, is that the community working group is quite a small group now of quite kind of dedicated people who are interested in expanding and growing the things that we do. And if you'd like to be one of them, then you can join us on our regular calls, which are every second Friday. And they happen on Mumble. And we also have a Slack channel where you're welcome just to paste any questions or suggestions or get to know a little bit about what we're doing. So thanks very much. Apologies for rushing through that slightly. And now I'm going to pass over to Paul to talk about field programs.
Rebecca, before you do, Tyler here, just want to jump in with one comment. For those of you who are new to HOT and are hearing this term working groups, I just wanted to kind of let everybody know that this is something that's a little bit unique to our community. And this is, when you hear the term working group, it's basically informal meetings between HOT board members, staff, volunteer leaders, and contributors. And it's coming together around certain topics. So there's one around our community and how we can plan and organize some of the webinars and community events. There's other working groups which you'll hear about later around our disaster activation, around communications, training, fundraising. And so as you hear about those are great places in addition to mapping where you might want to jump in and get sort of more deeply involved with HOT. So thanks, Rebecca, and back to you, Paul.
Yep, so hope the audio is coming through.
Yes.
Good, great, thank you. So yeah, I want to tell you a bit more about the field mapping and the projects HOT is going to be running in several countries. First, I'm going to tell a little bit about the countries who are currently operating or started operations over the past year, and then go into what we're planning to work on, projects we're starting up in the next year. In all of these projects, we're operating in some quite difficult contexts, and we really see it as our job to keep pushing ourselves into operating environments where we are most needed, where the data is most needed. And in the wake of, say, our presence in countries like Uganda and Turkey, like this one, leaving behind viable, sustainable OpenStreetMap communities. And in that sense, actually doing the mapping and providing partners and people that we train with and work with, an example of how things could be if there's proper collaboration, coordination around open data sources. So one of the largest projects we're currently working on is, it was more or less intended to be a pilot project funded by the Department of State around two of the largest refugee crises we have at the moment, in Uganda with the South Sudanese refugee crisis, and in Turkey. Between the time that we proposed this project and that we actually started working in Uganda, the refugee crisis there grew from 200,000 refugees to over 1 million. So we've had to operationalize and get our feet under us pretty quickly in Uganda. And right now we're collaborating very closely in Uganda with UNHCR, with MSF, with other partners on the ground, training them to be helping us on mapping and field data collection, working with refugees and local community members to do assessments on the mapping, going around the countryside in Uganda on motorbikes. And that helps us collect massive amounts of data really quickly, feed that back to UNHCR, to WFP, and help them provide better service to refugees, get an up-to-date overview, for example here, of how many water points are operational or which are broken in need of maintenance, and start acting on that. In reality, the landscape in search of refugee response is quite fragmented. There's a lot of NGOs implementing different types of operations, providing different sorts of aid in different parts of the countryside. So there's really a lot to be won there and be gained by having a research such as OpenStreetMap that is able to provide a good operating picture across partners for a large area of Uganda in this case. Next one. In addition to Uganda and Turkey, and I didn't mention much in Turkey, but that's also, I mean, this was a new context for us. we're quite lucky to have established a nice presence, a good operating presence in Istanbul now. And we are doing mapping in Istanbul there. In addition to that, we still have ongoing operations and projects in Indonesia. There's 3 at the moment. One of those being InnoWare, about collecting lifeline infrastructure data. So all types of data relevant to disaster preparedness, response, resilience across large areas of Indonesia, and implementing early warning systems. In Liberia, we're running a project together with DAI and USAID, focused on improving urban planning and capacity of cities to provide services to their inhabitants in 3 cities of Liberia. What you see in the image there is basically the state of the art in mapping as it existed in Liberia, which is a pretty cool paper map, but not sufficient for these cities to start tackling more complicated problems like there's a massive solid waste problem in these cities that they need to learn how to deal with, how to collect, how to process, how to store solid waste. And then in Tanzania, we have 3 projects at the moment. We started out in July on the continuation of Ramani Huria, which is our, one of the largest urban mapping projects in the world. We've worked with about 400 university students on mapping large areas of Dar es Salaam in detail, with a specific focus on infrastructure for flood resilience, so any types of waterways and infrastructure. And we're now expanding that with other sectoral data as well, so health, education, things relevant to youth and employment, etc. Another project we just started on in Tanzania is focused on rural electrification. So this is away from Dar es Salaam, but pushing much further into the countryside, scoping out which communities are the most feasible sites for sustainable energy sources away from the grid, and providing operators and people looking into providing energy sources for those with the data to start acting on that. And the third one is Data Zetu, focused more on health. This is basically an MCC, Millennium Challenge Corporation funded project, which is about collecting data which is relevant to health in a broad sense in 3 cities in Tanzania. Next one. Next slide, please. For next year, we will be expanding this again with new projects, new countries where we're working in. One that I'm really excited about is Botswana, where we will be collaborating directly with Botswana government, the Minister of Health, to be building on the work we've previously done with Digital Globe and Chai Clinton Health Access Initiative on remote mapping a large swath of Southern Africa, and mapping all the buildings in there. And now we're going to be doing ground verification and field mapping there to be collecting data on each individual building in a number of districts in Botswana to assess their suitability for interventions aimed at malaria eradication. So indoor residual spraying, beta distribution, also case management. And so we'll be going through the country basically together with Botswana government officials and teaching them, showing them how to incorporate OSM open data in their day-to-day workflow on malaria eradication. Another one that we will be starting on is in East Africa, continued expanded work around the ongoing refugee crisis there. There's not only the South Sudanese refugee crisis, but there's also still a lot of refugees coming from Burundi into Western Tanzania, Congolese refugees flowing into Uganda and Tanzania. We'll be expanding our projects there. Yep, next one. So a couple of things that I wanted to highlight about how we'd like to involve our community more in these projects, and our overall goals are that we'd like to start devoting a lot more time and energy to documenting and improving our overall mapping workflow, standardizing that, explaining more about the tools we use, why we use them, how all these different tools fit together. And Nate is going to tell you a bit more about Map Campaigner in a bit as well, and how that is tying together the different tools we have. we'd also like to better assess local communities in the mapping projects. The micro grants are an important part of that, but I mean, the most important part of our work is not that hot ones that have country teams in as many countries as possible, but that we want to build local OpenStreetMap hot communities, build their skills and capabilities and capacity to respond to disasters in their own countries, and make sure they can create high quality maps and data of their own countries and environments. With support from us where needed, but that's the end goal. We also want to create more opportunities for exchange learning between our teams. This is something we've not been doing that much before, also because we were operating in a limited set of countries, but now we're really starting to get to the point that, and size as an organization, that we need to start focusing on internal learning, knowledge exchange, skills, etc. And something we want to start building into our project proposals more rigidly is more space for experiments, for staff development, for internships, volunteering, etc. So on that note, there are areas where we can use more help at times and where we should also be asking for it more often. So we're really, of course, asking quite often for help on remote mapping, task and manager tasks, but we need to communicate it better at times. We'll definitely be doing that. Maybe there are people with good graphics design, map design skills, information management skills that we could really lend a hand and help us communicate some of the uses and advantages of what we're doing on these projects. Technical help at times on some projects where we don't, for example, on small projects, always have people with a wide range of technical skills. So something like that. Support for communities, more local communities, for example, through microgrants. And then lastly, before handing over to Nate, we will be planning a tech get-together in Kampala late February, where we'd really appreciate all your input. It will be focused on improving the tools, technology, methodologies for field mapping, and we'd like to hear from you what hurdles other people facing in their mapping projects. What do you think are the bottlenecks? How should we address those? Where can we improve? We will be organizing some feedback sessions for that, and those will be announced pretty soon on the hot mailing list by either me or Nate. So with that, on to Nate.
Right, thanks, Paul. So I'll be quick because I know we only have about 20 minutes left, and I want to make sure there's enough time for Michael and Russ and some further discussion. So I want to talk about three things, touch a little bit on like active projects, and then talk more about working group, like what's going on, what are we doing, and tell a little bit about plugging in. So next slide. So I sent a note earlier to the membership mailing list, and we're talking about some ways that we're improving. And last year 2017 was a very busy year on the technology side of things, and we launched a new tasking manager. We rolled out a new version of the export tool, and made huge strides in some of our core tools along the workflow. And we're continuing that theme into 2018, where we're very, very busy at the start of this year, and but then also addressing, continuing to think about that mapping workflow from remote mapping to field mapping to use and analysis, and addressing needs along that whole workflow with tools. So I want to talk about two different tool kind of sets of active projects. One are new tools. So we have a project called Visualize Change, which just kicked off, and I'll be sharing about that soon. It's looking at time-based visualizations across an AOI. I think I'm really excited about this project of kind of adding capabilities of kind of post-mapping analysis and seeing change in an area. We're just getting started on some new updates to OSM Analytics, or osmanalytics.org, kind of umbrella working area, and we're looking at applying that towards malaria and malaria elimination projects, and helping groups analyze and improve how projects are run. Then we're also working on essentially, late last year we rolled out new user accounts with OpenStreetMap. If you're not familiar with OpenStreetMap, it's a kind of a remote a satellite and UAV imagery sharing platform, and many projects make use of open imagery, and OEM allows anyone to upload and share, distribute that open imagery. And then the last one, which was mentioned a couple times, is looking at helping both address data quality, but also improve organizing field mapping as Map Campaigner. This is going to be rolling out and fully launching. We soft launched it at State of the Map US late last year, and we'll be rolling out some. We'll be launching it with some documentation here soon. Then on the updates and improvement side of things, we're rolling out some new updates to the MapKit server, making it easier to implement and manage data. We're in the middle of getting started on, well, actually not in getting started, but we started a rebuild and a redesign of the website. And all of these have links, which we'll share afterwards, and so you can kind of get a sense on what's happening where. Then there's ongoing work happening with the tasking manager, and continuing to improve, address issues, bugs that come up, but also think about this gradual kind of improvement and adding features. So a lot of work is happening there. And then lastly, a big component we're addressing earlier this year is our hot infrastructure. And so how do we run a solid kind of server infrastructure to provide the ability to run services, run tools, and equip the larger hot community with services that are always up and running. Next slide. And then, so to touch on the working group, so the tech working group is really the main force behind all of this. And then there's kind of two things that we're really looking at. We're improving, there's 5 things we're doing at really improving processes. So we're working on moving documentation and discussions into the open on GitHub. We've traditionally had those on mailing lists and it's kind of scattered around, and so we're organizing ourselves to help make sure that anyone can join in and see how we're making decisions and how we're doing software development in the open. Then a big thing is we're developing principles, guidelines, and goals around kind of how we make decisions within the community on our tech tools, bringing in other groups to help think about what is the future. And really helping push ourselves to have the right goals that continue to evolve and address needs of all our tools. And then, let's see, the bottom 2 things, we're expanding participation in Africa and Asia. So if you didn't catch note about, we've expanded the tech working group to have an earlier time in Asia. So if you're, we traditionally met in the afternoon and in Europe time, and that was limited in some time zones. So we now have 2 meetings that bridge a lot of time zones, and I think that's increased some participation. And then lastly, we're also making some spaces for kind of sub-working groups, and Tyler touched on this a little bit around kind of thinking about some of the topics around machine learning, data quality, and what we're going to be doing is tasking some small groups of individuals that want to work on and think about those ideas, to do a little work and then present and kind of help carry forward that discussion with the larger community. So lastly, where to plug in? There's kind of 3 ways. One is if you're not a part of Slack or IRC, you can jump in. We have a number of channels that are on each one of these tools. GitHub is, you don't have to have an account. You can at least peruse and see what information is there. And then we have a mailing list where we send out updates and coordinate a little bit via the Tech Working Group mailing list. And I'll stop there, and so we can keep this moving. So I'm going to hand over to Michael and the training working group.
Yes, thank you. And we're going to start off with the slide. The next one, please. So thanks, and I can promise I'll confine myself to this one slide. And even if you've never heard of the training working group before, I'm sure you've run across the core product of this working group, which is learnosm.org, our website, which tries to promote learning materials about virtually anything which is connected with OpenStreetMap. And in this past year, we try to bring our contents on the main editors, ID and JOSM, up to date. And we managed to bring our documentation for the new Tasking Manager 3 just in time with the release of the product. So the main tools used in humanitarian mapping should now be mainly covered by LearnerOSM. But LearnerOSM, in our opinion, is not just confined to humanitarian mapping. We see that it has a much broader scope. We'd like to cover more or less all aspects of OpenStreetMap. And that also includes, for instance, how you can get access to the data from OpenStreetMap and what you can do with it, what tools are there available in order to visualize or to do some analytics. And we also cover a couple of tools used in mobile mapping, just as OSM on Android and things like that. So over the past year, we could really get our documentation on the core tools like ID, JOSM, and the Tasking Manager up to date. But our coverage on the OSM data tools to use the mobile mapping certainly has not been reviewed for quite some time now, and that's one of the things I'd like to push forward this year, that we will really review the other parts of LearnerOSM and make sure that they go ahead with the current versions of the tools covered. The main problem is it's a volunteer project, and just as with the communications working group, even we in the training working group as well are just a handful of individuals, so we could really use some additional help. So if you feel competent in one of these fields, mobile mapping, for instance, and would like to write a document on that or review one of the guides, we'd really like to hear from you. But LearnerOSM is not just confined to English contents. One of the big assets is that it is available in 16 other languages right now, to a varying extent, of course, but we make sure that every language which appears on learnosm.org covers at least the introductory guide so that people get to know what is LearnerOSM, what is OpenStreetMap, what it's all about, and how to use ID. So anything you need to get started to make your first edits. We've got a couple of languages which nearly cover 100% of our contents, but these are rare. Again, translation is a community effort. We don't have a budget for professional translators, so if you see that some of the languages might need some expansion and you feel competent in those languages, just join the team. We would be happy to hear from you. And these languages are really important because in our experience, 50% of the visits to learnosm.org are in a language other than English. So, and with our operations continuing in many countries across the globe where English is maybe not the first language used, I think this is still growing in importance. And in the past year, we automated some of the processes involved, which means whenever a translator updates some contents on Transifex, the tool which we are using, a staging site for LearnerOSM is automatically updated where the translators can review if everything is all right. But transfer to the main learnosm.org site is still manual because we would like to maintain quality. We'd like to make sure that the images come out all right. We'd like to make sure that the content really has something to do with OSM and there is no spam included. And so we check all the links contained in those pages. All that is time consuming, and we'd really like to hear from people who would like to help us there. And we could also need some technical help, so in order to pull the strings in the background so people who'd like to know more about website design, we could use some help there as well. But LearnOSM is not the only activity of the training working group. We've also got one particular individual who is really good in mapathon design and help, and also trained a lot there. And we also manage this courses.hotosm.org, the Hot Training Center, where you can get in-depth training for some subjects. Currently, this is mostly for activation, so I will leave a detailed discussion there to the next speaker, Russ. As I said, we're just a tiny working group. If you think you can contribute, just drop us a line at the email address indicated in the lower right corner, and we will certainly get back to you. And with this, I would like to conclude and hand over to Russell for the activation working group.
All right, yeah, you can just kind of jump through the intro slide here. And yeah, I'm going to try to keep this real short so we can get some Q&A. For 2017, as Tyler mentioned, we had quite a few activations, 2 hurricanes, Irma and Maria, and then we had the 2 earthquakes in Mexico about the same time, and then kind of followed up pretty quickly with the Iran-Iraq earthquake. We also had quite a few times that local communities were responding to their own disasters and reached out to us for help. So Madagascar, Peru, DRC, Bangladesh and Nepal, and Bali. And go ahead, next slide. For 2018, yeah, we always need more mappers and validators, so jump to learnosm.org if you need to freshen up or get some skills on mapping or validating. Head to the tasking manager at task.hotosm.org for projects. If you want to get more involved in the coordination aspect of what we do with our disaster mapping program, we have a channel on Slack, and that's pretty much our main communication channel right now. Activation@hotosm.org is our mailing. If even if you're like a group that sort of watches for events and you want to notify us of something, drop us an email. As Michael mentioned, Courses is our training site if you want to actually become an activator and kind of help us make these decisions on how to respond. And then sort of our main goals for this year, with the microgrants, obviously they're a huge component of building up that local community capacity to respond themselves. We hope to do an entire protocol and curriculum update, at least to get it up to date with the new stuff on the Tasking Manager version 3 and the update to the export tool. Right now, the working group isn't actually meeting on a regular basis because it's just a handful of us and we pretty much just talk to each other all the time. If there's a desire to start getting a regular meeting going, contact me or jump on the Slack and we can talk about getting a regular meeting started again. And then, of course, we're always involved with the tech development that helps us improve our workflow. And I hope that was quick enough. And I'm not sure who I'm handing off to, so.
Hey, so now there's just a couple of slides on a few more ways to get involved, which we can skim through really quickly so we have time for questions. So the first one, as we said, was to join a working group. There's a link in here and we're going to share these slides afterwards. Supporting local mapathons as well. So we've developed a tool by which you can kind of say that you want to help other people who want to run mapathons in your local area. Also a link there to register. Technology, join in the discussion as Nate has just said. Next slide. We also had a huge number of people join us as regular donors during the last giving campaign, which was really nice. I think Rachel has the exact figures on that, but it's really important to receive kind of regular sustainable funding throughout the year. So there's a link there to become a monthly supporter. Obviously, as we know, mapping, there's a really nice picture on this slide, which is a map from an MSF field office. I believe Eureka provided it. But there's a nice date written on this map of 2015, So it's nice to be able to know that we're improving, maps drawn with crayons, even just a few years ago. And then the final thing is we're looking out for a volunteer to support us with some social media work. We've had one really amazing volunteer supporting us for the last few years, and it would be really great to kind of continue that. We've had a lot of great content coming out through those channels, and if you're interested in doing that, then please get in touch, because it would be great to bring someone new into that position. And now I think if you just click to the next slide, we'll go to some questions. Oh no, we won't, sorry. The 2018 calendar. I don't know, Tyler, if you want to whiz through this quickly.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. I think I'd like to get to some questions. So what we'll do is we'll share this, we'll make this slide deck publicly available later so you guys can all take note of these dates. These are events where we will have hot staff and or community members attending. And so we'd love to meet up at one or more of these events this year. I guess the other thing, before I forget to mention there, one event you won't see on this is the Hot Summit. The Hot Summit working group is still finalizing plans, but one thing I can announce is that we do plan to hold the Hot Summit in conjunction with one of these events on your screen here, and it will likely be one of the ones in the July to September category there. So keep an eye out for that announcement, and we're trying to do that in such a way that we get some synergies from combining forces, and we don't ask you to travel to yet an additional event. Thanks.
So now we have some time for discussion. We're all able to hang around and talk for a little while after the scheduled finish time. So if people have questions, they can either come off mute or just type them in this chat window here. I know that there was a couple that were raised during the call. I don't know if Paul's still on the line.
Yep, I am.
Perfect. There was one around internal learning between teams and what ideas we'd already started on that. I don't know if you're able to.
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah, I saw that was a question from Pete indeed. I tried a really brief answer to that, but we're basically looking at a range of options and, well, not really options, a range of ways of doing that. Some low tech, low cost, some higher cost if budget is available. So that ranges from providing online courses to staff to facilitating more discussion online. So Slack channels on different topics, having the field teams present more in the webinars to also enable them to learn more from their approaches to problems, their challenges, the ways they're solving these. Creating more opportunities for volunteering or not volunteering, more opportunities for, say, more or less like internships between teams. So that someone from, say, the team in Turkey can spend some time in Tanzania or vice versa. There's the field mapping tech meetup we're organizing at the end of February, where we intend to have representatives from all the field teams present there to have a good thorough look at how our mapping workflow is put together currently and what we can improve there, and also learn from each other's approaches, the problems we're running into, the solutions we're finding for those type of things. And yeah, there's a lot of other ways we can achieve this, of course. So really open to other suggestions from both staff, volunteers, community members on what else we could be doing there.
Thanks, Paul.
Welcome.
Perfect. Any other questions that people want to go through now?
Yeah, I have one more minute before I need to go. So if anyone has a question for me, then now's the time.
There was also one in the chat from Janet on if there's any other groups here who are using maps.me for field mapping. I don't know if anybody is.
Yeah, I see a response there that they're using it in Nigeria on the chat. I also know in Turkey there's a number of our volunteers, Syrian volunteers, that are using maps.me to be mapping. There's probably other examples as well. But.
Yeah, I know Bjorn, who is doing some research out of Cambridge, is using maps.me to map education facilities. I believe they've tried it in Zambia and Ghana. And they were actually, I was talking with him yesterday around some functionality improvements to make kind of it easier to edit maps.me for field projects. So I think he'd also be keen to hear what your suggestions are from your experiences in Tanzania as well. Are there any other questions that people want to either type in the chat or come off mute and ask? If not, I think there was a few questions which had come in prior to the call, things through kind of like the info@hot mailing list. So maybe we could just pop up some of those to share that. Perfect. So these can either be just kind of food for thought or things we talk through now. So one of the key questions that we get a lot is around how my work is actually helping and feedback mechanisms for that. It's something that seems to be, a bit of a disconnect between field programs and the actual mappers themselves. There's loads of projects happening where, the field team is very aware of the impact, but it's often quite hard to actually message that back to, remote mappers or people who aren't sort of part of that local community. And so, yeah, maybe I'll pass that one over to Tyler to talk about.
Sure. Yeah. So that's something we're continually working to get better at, I would say. I think oftentimes the data that you as our mapping community is producing is being used directly on the ground by GIS or information management staff with our partner organizations, but a lot of times you don't hear about it. So what we're trying to get better at is getting sort of just some basics back from those organizations, whether it's a quote, a photo, and helping to share some of that, number one, back into the tasking manager project. So if you keep an eye on your tasking manager projects, or if you're managing a tasking manager project, this is something that we'd ask you to keep working on to provide feedback to your mappers. And the other way is that we're planning to relaunch the hotosm.org website in the coming months. And as part of that relaunch, projects will have a project page, and a component of that project page will be sort of on usage of the data. And we'll have the capability, which we can't do now, of actually updating, putting in sort of links to media reports or publications on how the data was used, or just provide some photos or sort of snippets from the field.
Perfect. So moving on to the next one, on how do I keep track of various conversation threads. It's kind of been quite an interesting evolution, I think, in the last couple of years around people starting to use lots of different types of tools or communication channels to communicate on or talk about work within the HOT community. And one of the key findings so far from the community research is that you know, to engage the most number of people, we need to be connecting with people on the forums that they use. So if that community or that group of people is talking on WhatsApp, we should be there. If they're talking on Telegram, we should be there. If they're talking on Slack, we should be there. And so we've really tried to kind of expand into these broadened networks. But obviously that changes things slightly from where, you know, in the past, you know, everything was just on one mailing list and it was kind of easy just to look in that one place. So in terms of keeping track of those various conversation threads, I think kind of going through, you know, a particular working group or a particular channel that group that you're sort of wanting to engage with is on, that's kind of the best thing. And the sort of increasingly questions are either sent just to the mailing list or to the general channel in Slack, and then people can kind of direct you to the best place to have that question answered. So that's what we'd say there.
Rebecca, I'd also encourage everyone, I think most people on this call are already connected to our communications channels, but if you're not, you can go to slack.hotosm.org to join the conversation on Slack. You can also go to our website, hotosm.org, and scroll all the way to the bottom, and there's a place where you can sign up for our mailing list and our newsletter. We send out a newsletter about once a month, which will just give you sort of the highlights of what's happening.
Perfect. The next question is around non-mapping volunteering opportunities. I don't know, shall I pass that one to you, Tyler?
Sure. So if you'd like to try out mapping with us, many of you are already doing it. If you haven't tried it yet, you can go to tasks.hotosm.org. You've already been mapping with HOT for quite some time and you'd like to get more involved. Nate, my colleagues Nate and Paul and Rebecca talked about a lot of opportunities for you to do that. I would suggest a good place to start is to look at the working group calendar and see which group you might be interested in joining. And within those groups, there's lots of little activities that you can take on. And really, the powerful thing with those groups is you can have take a leadership role. If you have a good idea, you can just take it and run with it. You don't need to seek permission from anybody. And so I think the working groups is probably the best place to start with that. And we'll share this presentation, which will have a link to where to find the working group calendar.
Perfect. This next question is on there because we were really surprised to see this come out very significantly in the community survey. So there was something like 267 respondents and about 20% of people said that they were actively making presentations about HOT, like at conferences or you know, university events, things like that, which is obviously something that, you know, everybody is really keen to encourage and make sure is something that's, you know, easy for people to do and easy to sort of spread the message, as it were. And so, yeah, there was, we kind of thought that, you know, maybe it's useful to share more about, you know, standard presentations on HOT that we already have, that just make sort of setting up for those things quite easy. So essentially we have a number of general presentations which you can just email really any one of the staff team or myself to get a hold of, and then, you know, any kind of specific changes that you might want to make to a specific you know, audience or event, you know, you're either very welcome to kind of make those yourself or we can support with that. But yeah, it was something that was, I guess, quite a nice finding out of the survey was how many people were actually sort of spreading the word in different places, but also something we were aware can be a bit of a time burden to prepare a presentation every time, especially, you know, if we already have quite a few of those available. So I don't know, Rachel, if there was any more questions still on this slide. Perfect. Okay. So the next one is, how do I promote and share my local OSM community project, which is quite a broad question, obviously, which I think also has quite a large range of answers. It might be interesting to turn this one to someone in the group who is actually doing this. I don't know, Janet, if you're able to come off mute and talk a little bit about how you've been doing that, because obviously Tanzania Development Trust has had huge success with kind of increasing image with and increasing kind of awareness of your mission within the HOT community.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, and sorry to put you on the spot there.
That's okay. So with Crowd2Map, obviously we benefited hugely from having a microgrant. We're basically trying to map rural Tanzania, particularly to protect girls from female genital mutilation. So we've managed to engage with quite a few journalists and so on, particularly around that. So we they produced on our behalf a short video that was on Al Jazeera, and it was also in the Guardian and lots of other media sources. So our remit really is to try and map all of rural Tanzania, but we're starting with the areas where girls are at risk of FGM, partly because that's a huge issue, but also because it's a way that you can tell a story about the impact of the maps, particularly in that area, which is helpful for engaging more mappers. So we've also engaged with online mappers from UN Online Volunteering. And I guess I try and talk about the project wherever I can. So next Tuesday is International Zero Tolerance for FGM. So we'll have an online event. We're hoping to do something for Open Data Day, probably for International Women's Day. So trying to think of stories around the real life needs for maps in the areas where we're mapping, and tie that into international days that are already happening, and talking about the project wherever you can, really.
Perfect. Thanks very much for sharing that. And yeah, especially since Crowd2Map has been really, I don't know how many people it is. I'm sure you can correct me. Something like 4,000 people you've mapped for the Crowd2Map projects.
Yes, it's probably more than that now, but yes.
Perfect. Great. Okay, so the next thing we had on here was just around how to get more updates around the HOT community. I think maybe that's largely answered by Tyler's response earlier around keeping track of conversation threads. That's specifically on the newsletter, which by popular demand is moving from every 2 months to every 1 month. The newsletter is a great place to get a kind of digest, I guess, of what's going on. But the mailing list and the Slack are a really great place to be part of more regular conversations, or more sort of day-to-day questions and updates. And then now this question on voting membership. Should I pass that one to you, Tyler?
Sure. Do we still have Peter or Melanie? Are you on the call? Maybe you'd like to address that one.
I think Pete had to jump off, but Melanie may still be around.
I am here. Yeah, I'm just wondering what the... Hi, can you see me here? Hi. What is the question behind this?
Around when the next nomination period would be for voting membership, and if there's any plans for that.
Yeah. So basically, we're just starting. We just discussed this in the board as well. So nomination period is going to start soon, and we will also discuss closer with membership in the near future about the nomination processes, and get back to you soon. Also discussing further with Vikram Maron, who's also the voting chair here. And you can wait for updates from the board regarding this as well. Or is there something else to add?
No, thanks, Melanie. That's great. I would also just add to what Melanie said. Voting membership is sort of a small group of people within HOT. It's about 131 people right now, and you don't, by no means do you need to be a voting member to contribute to HOT, but we would definitely welcome you to think about joining. It's sort of a way to show your commitment and show your leadership on specific activities within the HOT community. And you can be nominated, if you're interested in that, you could talk to an existing voting member, and any existing voting member could nominate you for to join the voting membership. Rebecca, we had a couple of questions come in on the chat. Maybe we could address those really quickly. One of them was I think it was from Samin around why OSM. So I could take that one quickly. So Samin, if you haven't tried it yet, OSM is really great because it's a way, we see it as a way to really take ownership of your data. And as opposed to some of the commercial map sources, by mapping in OSM, you can, if you see areas that are missing or not up to date, you can actually make those corrections. And not only that, but once the data has been updated, once you've worked on adding detail to an area, you own that data, so you can do whatever you'd like with it in accordance with the open database license, and basically would allow you to share that data, would allow you to use it in other applications, would allow you to download it and export it and do analysis on it, which is why it's used really heavily in humanitarian applications. And then there was also, Rebecca, I believe there was a question from...
Thank you.
Sure. There was also a question from, let's see, on International Women's Day from Victor.
Yeah.
Is there anything we can say on that one now?
Yeah, so International Women's Day, which I believe is the 8th of March. I think Victor and I were actually talking about this just the other day. But I think, it's something that obviously HOT is really mindful of, and it's a really great opportunity to encourage and promote a lot of the work that we're doing around gender participation anyway. So kind of following on from what Janet said, it's really nice to be able to align some of that, what we're doing, to these broader global events. We'd be keen to run a sort of global mapathon style event. We did something similar last year on World Malaria Day, and kind of activated a lot of people to contribute to tasks that specifically focused on malaria. So we were hoping to do something similar this year, focusing specifically on gender inclusion. But we're also kind of very keen to collaborate with other groups or communities who want to run individual events and sort of support those events. So if you have any ideas on how you'd like that to happen, or ways we can get involved, then I'm more than happy to. Any other questions coming through quickly, or is it time to round up for the day? Perfect. Well, I guess people have shared quite a few email addresses and things during this. We'll send out the slides afterwards so that you have all the links available. But I guess the main thing to do is say, thanks so much for joining and being part of this and giving your opinions. And also thank you very much to all the volunteers who also contributed to these presentations as well. I think it was Michael who said that, it's very much a community effort, and a lot of these things kind of appear to be running very smoothly, but actually involve a lot of hard lift behind the scenes. And so it's really kind of appreciated, and new people to dive in with that is really important. So thanks so much for joining, and make sure you watch out for the February webinar, which is on validation. Could be something that, you know, you want to join to learn validation in more detail, or to share with, you know, communities mapping for your projects if you want to get more validators online. So the link is in there, and feel free to join. So yeah, speak to you next time.
Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you all. Thank you all.